On September 1st, 1755, Antoine de La Boularderie penned the letter that's been referenced throughout our three-part episode about the Boularderie family. It was his hope that the letter would somehow find its way to either the halls of Versailles, where the nation's ministers would realize they had forgotten about him, or to a wealthy protector who would advocate for him in France. This letter is part of a collection of correspondence that passed through Louisbourg during the 18th century and was published in a book called Les Derniers Jours de l'Acadie in the late 1800s by Gaston du Boscq de Beaumont. Because this letter is what's known as a primary source or a first-hand eyewitness testimony, it is invaluable to the story of the Boularderies and to the historical record of Cape Breton. A word of warning before we begin. In this letter, Antoine uses an offensive term when writing about a man's black slave. The term has been translated literally from the original letter and has not been altered. Please use appropriate discretion. Let us listen to the words of Antoine le Poupet de la Boularderie. Upon leaving the service as page to His Royal Highness in January of 1724, I entered as lieutenant in the regiment of Richelieu. I remained in that post for 7 years, and afterward was granted command of a company in the same regiment, which I led for 9 years. I served in the campaign of Kehl, Philipsburg, and Clausen. When peace was made, after 18 months, owing to a reversal of fortune, I sold my company. The following year, upon the death of my father, to whom the king during his lifetime had granted command over his lands and concessions, His Majesty saw fit to bestow upon me the same prerogatives. Accordingly, I sold a house in Paris, my last remaining resource, and returned to Île Royale, Cape Breton Island. I brought with me laborers from Normandy, workmen, and all the necessary tools for cultivating the land. For 8 years I employed 25 people, during which time they built me a fine house, a barn, a stable, a dairy, a dovecote, an oven, a windmill, and a watermill for grinding grain. I had 25 cows, 6 oxen, 6 mares, 50 sheep, and a stallion. Such was, to the knowledge of all, the state of my fortune when, by the fate of war, I lost everything. I also had land under cultivation, producing fine wheat and vegetables, equal in quality to those found in Europe. I also brought fruit trees from France, which flourished. I have more than 1,000 of them, and a botanical garden of rare species. It had been but 6 months since all my works were completed, and I hoped to live a gentle life in my pleasant retreat, when the king declared war on the English. Monsieur Duquesnel, our governor at the time, decided that the fort of Canso must be taken and asked me to join the expedition. The officers charged with it had no experience, never having served in wartime. I was delighted by the proposal and went forth. The fort surrendered, and the garrison was made prisoner of war for 1 year. The following year, while I was on my land, I learned that Louisbourg was blockaded by sea by an English fleet. I left my home in a small boat. It is 14 leagues to Louisbourg, and passed through the middle of the enemy fleet, arriving safely within the fortress. 3 days later, the enemy made various movements with their ships in Upper Gabarus Bay, a league and a half from the town. I asked the commandant to give me a detachment, so that I might set up an ambush in the woods opposite, where I suspected they intended to land. My request was lightly dismissed. 2 hours passed in fruitless discussion, while many boats were seen putting men ashore. Then I declared that it was shameful not to charge the enemy as they landed, that we should take half the garrison, and that I would answer with my life for the success of the enterprise. We had every advantage on our side. there is always confusion during landings, and besides, it was cold, the enemy were poorly dressed, soaked, badly armed, and fearful. Miserable wretches! The woods were but half a pistol shot from the shore, yet my counsel went unheeded. At length they roused themselves from this lethargy. The commandant told me to form a detachment of 80 men, half soldiers and half militiamen. No officer of the garrison offered to march. Monsieur Maupin, the harbour captain, placed himself at the head of the detachment with me. At the time I held no official post among the troops. We were ordered to repel the enemy. We had gone scarcely a cannon shot from the town when we saw more than 1,500 of the enemy already ashore and forming ranks as they landed. I told Monsieur Maupin that it was useless to attack such a superior force, that our chance had been lost, and that it was now impossible to prevent the English from besieging Louisbourg. Had I been given the detachment 4 hours earlier, I could have stopped them and given them something to think about. No matter, said Maupin, let us go on. We had scarcely gone half a league when, instead of taking cover in the woods, we were marching openly in file. The English ships moored broadside, caught sight of us and greeted us with their artillery. Monsieur Maupin told the men, take 15 paces interval to avoid the fire. I told him the march was in complete disorder, and that if he would let me take over, I could get him out of this peril. Seeing the enemy advance, my intention was to form the detachment into 4 communicating platoons, maintaining a continuous fire of 20 muskets, each platoon of 20 men firing, and then falling back to reload. Thus I would have ensured an orderly retreat against such adversaries. Only 12 French soldiers followed us. I said to him for the last time, halt the detachment and reform it. You know nothing of land service, just as I know nothing of naval warfare. There's still time. We are within musket range of the enemy. By the maneuver I propose, we shall make an honorable retreat and not fall into their trap. He made no reply but went on, and I followed until we found ourselves stopped in a hollow, surrounded by the enemy. They opened a violent fire. He lost his head and told me to hold out as long as I could while he went to gather the detachment to rescue me. Outraged, I said, Maupin, you have done a foolish thing. To flee in disorder is dishonorable. This place shall be our tomb. He persisted in going, with barbarity cried out, every man for himself. His Negro servant carried, dragged, and concealed him beneath leaves, saving him from capture. In gratitude, Maupin granted the man his liberty. By chance, he returned to the fortress 3 days later. I was left alone with my 12 brave soldiers. We fell back a few paces, firing point blank from behind the trees. The enemy surrounded us, killed 7 of my men, and wounded the other 5, who were fortunate enough to reach the fortress. Seeing myself alone, without hope of help, I threw myself sword in hand into the midst of the enemy, where I was wounded by 2 gunshots and taken prisoner, as certified by the document I have the honor to send you. They kept me aboard their fleet for 40 days. The day before the town surrendered, they sent me to Boston, 200 leagues from Louisbourg. I remained there for 3 months, during which the English government, having gained confidence in me, placed me in charge of the French prisoners. I went through different parts of the country to gather them together, and afterward arranged for their embarkation on 7 vessels. We landed in France at different ports. At that time, all my possessions, as mentioned above, had not yet been damaged by the English. A party of French freebooters and Indians, under orders from Monsieur de la Galissonière, failed to execute them as intended. Instead of ravaging the English, they came on Pentecost Day and burned all my houses, though peace had already been signed on April 30th. I returned to France, where the minister promised me the Cross of Saint Louis and his protection upon my return to Île Royale. I embarked aboard the Intrépide, commanding a detachment of our troops forming the new garrison of Louisbourg, which the English had restored to us. Since that time I have received no news from court, nor any reward. I have nothing to reproach myself for. I defy my enemies, if I have any, to find fault with my conduct. I served on guard for a year. We were but 4 captains performing duty, the others being detached. Young officers from different corps, reformed in France, were incorporated into our troops and regained their seniority of rank from France. Thus I had the mortification of relieving a captain of 22 years. I asked M. Desherbiers, our governor at the time, to allow me to go and re-establish my estate, which he granted, having no other resource than my pay of 720 livres. 150 livres are still withheld annually, for a debt left unpaid by my late father, which I have assumed. Furthermore, I am burdened with a large family. Nevertheless, with the little means I have, I built myself a house and laid out vast gardens, whose beauty would astonish strangers, as much for their plants as for the variety of fruit trees of all kinds. This has left me in debt, having received no favor whatsoever, and has prevented me from improving my lands or placing livestock upon them, although my land grants include extensive meadows. I trust that Monsieur le Comte de Raymond and Monsieur de Sur-la-Ville will have the kindness to do me justice in what I affirm. They have both visited my home. Had I been supported, I would now be in comfort and of great use to the colony. For though my estate is but 14 leagues from Louisbourg, the climate is actually quite different. Louisbourg is subject to much fog and cold, whereas at my home, the season is marked by great heat and the absence of fog. I have now no patronage. I am without protection, having lost the support of His Royal Highness and the relatives who formerly assisted me. I find myself unknown to all and in extreme distress. If His Grace the Duke of Richelieu has recovered from his illness, he has always shown me kindness, as has Monsieur de Crémy and his brothers likewise. I throw myself at their feet, imploring them to grant me the Cross of Saint Louis, the fixed command of Port-Dauphin, which is near my estate, or a gratuity sufficient to restore it. My wounds and my losses entitle me to make these requests. I rely on those who will have pity upon my condition. With the deepest respect, I remain their most humble, most obedient, and most faithful servant. La Boularderie, at Louisbourg, September 1st, 1755.